It's funny, they have seats in the back.
To see how the Mayoral get cut from the bag.
That's great.
Okay, we do have a couple of seats over here if you are looking for seats. Oh, it's right there. All right, I want us to get started about on time, so I'm going to ask people to take a seat as quickly as you can, so we don't waste a lot of time seating. There is an overflow room if you fill out the chairs.
Long as I can get a bus, once after the building closes, I can't.
All right, are we ready to go knowledge wise? All right, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. We were expecting a full house and we had one, so that's great. We also have a lot of people on Zoom as well, a couple of hundred people on Zoom, so that's great. I'm Joy Cardine. I'm a candidate forum moderator for the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin and Dane County. I used to do this sort of work for Wisconsin Public Radio once in a while. I'm also the president of the Midvale Heights Community Association, which is one of the 7 area neighborhood associations that is sponsoring this forum. The others are Crawford, Marlboro, Tacoma, Regent, Sunset Village, Summit Woods, University Hill Farms, and Westmoreland. Representatives from all of the neighborhoods are here running equipment or helping you find a seat or passing out cards. So thanks to all of our neighborhood representatives and volunteers who are here today. And thank you as well to District 11 Alder Bill Tischler, who has the professional technical know-how and equipment to record this hybrid forum. We will be posting the recording on our neighborhood websites and social media sites and other platforms when it's ready for those who can't be with us tonight. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you need to leave, need to use a restroom, there's a restroom right out this door. Please be as quiet as possible and don't distract the candidates from answering their questions, or for that matter, the people sitting next to you. Please turn the sound down on your phones, turn the sound off on your phones so we don't get interrupted by your ringtones. We have asked the people on Zoom to stay muted. We have their microphones off so we don't hear their dogs barking or their family arguments. So we ask that you also don't have conversations, don't chit chat with your neighbors while we're trying to hear the answers to our questions. And please don't cheer or jeer or applaud the candidates as they're answering questions. There'll be time, in the beginning and end to applaud them as a group, but let's not get up and start saying things when people are trying to answer questions. If anyone in our in-person audience has a question, please write it on the index cards that were on your chairs. A volunteer will get those cards to me. You can raise up the card and a volunteer will come by, pass it down, and we'll get the question to me. The same is happening with the Zoom audience. You can write your questions in the chat and we're monitoring that, and we'll get those questions as well to me. We aren't going to be able to get to hundreds of questions here. We have 90 minutes and we're going to have about 2 minutes per question for our candidates to answer those questions. We have a timekeeper who's going to be lifting up a yellow piece of paper when they have 30 seconds to go, and a red piece of paper when it's time to wrap it up. So we'll try to get in as many questions as we can, depending on the length of the answers. And we will also allow 2 minutes for opening statements and 2 minutes for closing remarks. So we are looking forward to a very lively and civil forum and informative forum. This is intended to help you to get to know the candidates and their positions on the issues that matter to you, that matter to your neighborhood, and that matter to the entire city. So please give a warm welcome to our mayoral candidates. I'm going to have the candidates introduce themselves in their opening remarks. So you can highlight the aspects of your resume that you think are important to this job. Please include why you want to be the mayor of Madison. You have 2 minutes, starting with Gloria.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Gloria Reyes. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. I'm running for mayor because I care about this community. Madison raised me. As a daughter of migrant farm workers who came to Madison in the early 70s, I'm the product of what best Madison has to offer. I graduated from Madison East High School. I went on to Madison College, went on to UW-Madison, and graduated later with a master's in public administration. I became a law enforcement officer because I wanted to be that change. I wanted to build trust and relationships with our communities of color and law enforcement. I was noticed for my work, and I was appointed as deputy mayor under Mayor Soglin for 5 years. And against all odds, I was elected by the city of Madison voters to be the first Latina to serve on the Madison School Board. And then just 1 year on, I was appointed to serve as school board president during the most tumultuous times in recent history, where I led the Madison School District throughout the pandemic and responded as in leadership to respond to the social unrest after George Floyd's murder. So now I'm here today. I have been drafted to run for mayor. And that is because the residents of Madison know that I care about the residents. I am concerned about the future of Madison under the current leadership. We need to take action on building a vision for the future of Madison, a local economy that works for everybody, building housing that's attainable for everybody, and building an environment of public safety that protects everybody. We need a mayor that will engage and listen to our residents and take your concerns and ideas back to City Hall. Solving these challenges creates a Madison where we're moving into tomorrow. And I ask you to join me in moving Madison forward together by voting Gloria Reyes for mayor on February 21st and April 4th. Thank you.
My name is Scott Kerr. I'm a lifelong Madison resident who has worked my entire adult life for the city of Madison. I want to be mayor because I want to see us make more common sense decisions, be fiscally responsible, and be a better city, be the leader that we once were, not try to take over and follow in other examples from other cities, but to do things that fit our city. I'm hoping that everyone votes for, at least gets out and voices their opinion on this, and hopefully gets us a Supreme Court justice that will restore the fair maps to the state, and maybe we can even get our shared revenue back to help the city improve.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Satya Rhodes Conway. I am proud to be the mayor of Madison, a great city. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see such a great turnout, and hello to all the folks that are online. Thanks for zooming in. And I want to take a moment to thank all of the neighborhood associations for the work that you put into making this possible. I really appreciate it. And I know it's volunteering for a neighborhood association is not always the top of people's lists. So thank you for those of you who are doing the work. 4 years ago, Madison voted for change. They voted for a mayor that would take the housing crisis seriously, that would bring, finally, after decades, rapid transit to our city, that would tackle climate change, and that would infuse racial equity into everything that the city does. I'm proud to say that 4 years later, we have made progress on all of those fronts and more. And that's despite a global pandemic and the associated economic impacts and a state legislature which seems determined to oppose us at every turn here in Madison. I'm proud of the record that what we did through the pandemic. I'm proud of my collaboration with the county executive and the Public Health Agency to lead our community through a very difficult time, and of the work that we did that resulted in Madison having one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. I think we should all be proud of our community and the way that we dealt with the pandemic. And now in the aftermath, we face new challenges. We face public safety challenges, we face economic development challenges, and we face challenges with our young people who were unfortunately deeply impacted by the pandemic. And these are the things that I think we need strong leadership to work on. I promised you that I would work on the issues that are important to Madison 4 years ago, and that's what I've done every day since. And I promise you that if you give me a second term, I will continue to work on the issues that are important to Madison. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The first question for all of you is, there are numerous issues facing the city, and I'm sure we will hear about a lot of them during this forum. But the first question is, what will be your top priority? Number one priority if you are elected mayor of Madison. What do you want to accomplish first? And we are going to alternate the starting rotation of this. So Scott, you start that one.
Okay, my top priority would be to make Madison government more responsive to their citizens. The way I want to do that is to set up an online polling system where all the issues that come before the city, we can have displayed with pros and cons, the costs, what happens if we don't do it, what happens if we do it, and then let the public voice their opinions so that we can use that to address how the council votes and how the mayor decides things. I want us to be able to make collective decisions instead of just the select few people that can attend a council meeting or be part of the committee meetings to get their side heard. I want all Madison citizens to be able to put input in.
One of the things about being mayor is that you don't have the luxury of having only one priority and working on one thing at a time. You have to be able to hold multiple priorities and work on multiple things at once. And I think that's what I've done over the past 4 years. But looking forward, I think that there are two things that stand out for our community. And the first is public safety, and the second is housing. We have got to tackle the impacts of the pandemic on the safety of our community. And I'm really proud of the work that our police department has done. Under Chief Barnes's leadership, they have taken a very strategic and targeted approach to the crimes that our community has said are the top priority, and that's gun violence, traffic crashes, and stolen cars. And in all of those cases, we are seeing things trend in the right direction. Now, none of those things, and there's no incident of any of those things that is acceptable in our community. So we have to keep working until we're at zero. But I believe that we're headed in the right direction, and I will continue to support Chief Barnes in his work to address the issues that are most important to Madison. Housing is a longer-term crisis for our community. It's something we've been working on for 4 years, and we will continue to work on going forward. But I'm very proud that under my leadership, we've more than doubled the amount of funding we're putting into our affordable housing fund, and that we have permitted thousands of new units of housing across our community. We've got to keep building housing, but we also specifically have to keep building affordable housing so that everyone can choose to live in the neighborhood that they want to live in and has an option with different types of housing, whether that's multifamily or single family, duplex, connected, disconnected. Everybody should have a choice of where they get to live and where they can afford to live. And that's the Madison housing market that I am working to build and will continue to work on over the next 4 years.
I think all these issues are intertwined. I think it's difficult to say that one should be priority for a mayor. I think it is public safety, it is attainable housing and economic development. They're all intertwined. And equity, infusing equity throughout everything that we do. Public safety, we're not heading in the right direction. We have some critical issues here. We are losing Black children to the juvenile justice system. We need some intervention, and we need to help support our most vulnerable youth in our city, providing wraparound services to invest in them today so that we are investing in our city into the future. We are still seeing robberies, car thefts, homicides in our city. And we cannot have a quality of life in our city if we have public safety issues and challenges. It's a priority. And we can't have, economic development and a strong economy if we are not having public safety. And so it's all intertwined. We need attainable housing. We need housing for our most vulnerable populations. And we need a transit system that works for everybody. And so you have to have a holistic and develop a vision for the city that culminates all these issues. And what we also need is the voice of our community and the vision of our city. That is not what's happening right now. We need the voice of our residents to guide our mayoral priorities, to figure out grassroots what is going on in our community. And so I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time answering that question because they are all intertwined, right? It is public safety, it's economic development, it's affordable housing, it's a transit system that is built on equity. So that's how I would answer that question.
The next question was submitted by the Regent Neighborhood Association. That's one of the benefits of sponsoring a Mayoral forum. They can answer the questions. And let me ask our audience, both in person and on Zoom, to please include your neighborhood with your questions. So at least we can try to get to as many different neighborhoods and issues as possible. Again, this one's submitted by the Regent Neighborhood Association. The city is proposing a zoning change that will affect 50,000 houses in the city. In view of the city's earlier experience in the 80s, where entire blocks close to the UW were converted to rental student housing in response to a similar zoning change. Number one, do you think the city has thoroughly researched and analyzed the potential of the proposed change to cause unintended or negative consequences? Should the city create an overlay district to prevent real estate speculation and conversion of homeowner occupied houses into student rental housing?
Thank you. So I know this is a very important issue, not just for the Regent neighborhood, but for neighborhoods all around our campuses. And I think we have to balance a couple of things. As I said earlier, housing is one of the #1 issues in our community, and our community is experiencing a housing crisis. We have to look at all of the options that are available to us to make it easier for people to afford to live in Madison. What's happening right now is that baristas, librarians, police officers, firefighters, teachers are being priced out of our community. That's not okay, right? We need to be a community that is affordable and accessible to everyone. So we do have to look at all the options in front of us. So yes, there is a proposal right now to change some of the occupancy limits and the definition of family in our zoning code. That's under discussion. In fact, I just met this morning with staff and asked them to do additional research and to answer some of the questions that are coming out of the neighborhoods. I also have asked the staff and the sponsoring alders if we could build in more time for community conversation on this issue. Now, there's some folks that are sponsoring it that want to move quickly. I think that's unfortunate because I think our neighborhoods deserve a chance to really talk through all of these issues. I am concerned about real estate speculation. I think that's something that our community has to watch for. I'm concerned about displacement in our community, but I'm also concerned about our zoning being weaponized against families, particularly families of color, which is what we're seeing right now. So I think it's important for us to understand all of these consequences, intended and unintended. I think it's important for us to listen to our neighborhoods and understand what their concerns are. I know folks are concerned about noise. I know folks are concerned about property maintenance. That's something that we have to take seriously and do a better job on. But I'm hoping that as this proposal works its way through the Plan Commission, the Housing Strategy Committee, and the council, that we'll have time to have that robust debate, that we'll have time to hear about the research that staff have done, that we'll have time to answer all of the questions that have been raised, which are good and important questions. So I'm pushing for us to take the time we need. to have this conversation. And I hope that everybody will engage in it.
I think, I think that's the problem with this administration. I think it is, you have to bring our residents along when we want to bring change to our communities. You can't bring an issue to our community and pass it without doing a robust community engagement and listening to the residents in our city. And the funny thing is, it's not going to really impact family market. It's going to destroy it. We need to think about moving Black and brown people into home ownership is what we should be doing. We shouldn't be changing our neighborhoods. In my perspective as a school board, former school board president, I know what this kind of zoning impacts our schools. And we're not even thinking about that. If we learn from back in the day when students started taking over single family homes in the campus area, families started moving out. And then we had to start closing schools because of low enrollment. There's a significant impact in making this type of a decision, and it should be thoughtful. We shouldn't be making this type of decision. It decreases enrollment. We also need to fill the MMSD position on the Planning Commission, because if we had a voice, a representative on the Planning Commission with the expertise on MMSD, this would have came up ahead of time. We cannot afford to lose our schools. We need to learn from our past. And closing schools in the downtown area is what happened. And is that what we want for our community? Our residents buy homes in the neighborhoods for a reason. They're homeowners. They want to live there. And if we want to talk about equity, let's get Black and brown people into home ownership. That's the direction we need to go as a city. Thank you.
The unintended consequences of recent zoning changes are not going to be felt for quite a while. The bus rapid transit system and the transit overlay zoning conflict with each other. So now we've got a situation where there's no parking on the street. There's no access to a lot. We're going to let them build a zero lot line multi-unit in what was formerly a single family residence neighborhood. The only way to build that is to obstruct the lane that the bus needs to run through there. As far as adjusting the definition of family, the world has changed. We definitely need to look at it. And I can see where single family homeowners are afraid of having a flop house next door to them where there's a bunch of students turning it into basically Animal House.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see that. We will need to allow for more unrelated people to live in one house, though. Protecting single family neighborhoods, maintaining the business neighborhoods or the commercial districts, shopping districts, so that we don't turn them all into the same feel where we've got multi-units scattered everywhere. It's not what anybody wants. The family that wants a single family home in a fenced in yard, that's what they desire. That's what they dream for and work towards. Helping them get into that should be the goal of the mayor and the city.
Our next question is from Sunset Village Community Association. Currently, the city has a wide variety of adopted sub-area neighborhood plans which vary in size, scope, and level of detail. These plans have been developed over many years with financial support from the city as well as oversight by city staff. Hundreds of neighborhood volunteers have spent years in crafting plans that represent their unique neighborhoods. The city would now like to bring all of these plans under a 13 higher level area plans. For instance, the proposed Near West plan would include Westmoreland, Regent, Sunset Village, Sunset Hills, Marlboro, Crawford, Tacoma, and others. Obviously, unique characteristics of these neighborhoods would be neutralized into a broader, more general plan, losing many of the unique characteristics that define each. This process is now beginning on the west side of Madison. What are your thoughts on keeping or consolidating these existing neighborhood plans? And I believe the mayor's the first floor you start.
I think that, again, when I become mayor, I'm going to bring in our planning, I'm going to reinvigorate our planning councils. And I'm going to work with our planning councils to help set up my mayoral priorities on housing in neighborhoods. And it is going to be with their guidance and their voice in each different neighborhood on what we want to see in the future. We've done a lot of work in those area neighborhood plans. And again, to change them from a top down is an issue. I think we have to really listen to the residents of our neighborhoods, our neighborhood associations, and get their voice on it. I think that because so much engagement was done, I'm not sure exactly why we are changing it. And I think that in order to bring people along for change, they need to understand why. What is the reason that we're making this change? And so we have to share our vision and bring people along to see that vision, because we just don't have it.
Maintaining the individual neighborhood plans that were worked on is a great idea as long as all of the residents in those neighborhoods agree with that. We need to find out if that's what they want. I have some challenges with planning because when I've seen a new plan for our district and they show me multi-unit housing where a Walgreens is, and I have to ask the planner, have you ever seen a Walgreens store sell so that we could build housing? But that's what they put on their plan. We need realistic input from the community on what they want. And we need planners that actually respond to what the community wants. If that is a large plan that unifies the entire west side or unifies big blocks of the city, great. But I want to know that that's what all of those residents want. If 51% of the residents don't weigh in and say that they want to join in on a larger plan, we shouldn't do it. We should leave it alone as it is. And advanced planning going into the future needs to be realistic and not throwing in things that we think we want, but things that actually might happen. So we're not going to turn a golf course into housing units, or we're not going to move a Walgreens out of their location.
Well, I think unfortunately the question sort of misunderstands what the planning department is trying to do. And the essence of community planning is to engage with the neighborhood and to listen to residents. That's the whole point. And one of the unfortunate things about the system that we have now is that plans get done in two circumstances. They get done when a neighborhood has, under the census definitions, a low enough income that the city will pay for it, or when a neighborhood is frankly rich enough to do it themselves. That leaves out whole swaths of our city that literally have no neighborhood plan right now. It also means that the time it takes for us to get back to update a neighborhood plan, we have neighborhood plans that are 40 years old. And I mean, that's not fair. So what the planning division is trying to do, and what I support, is to make it fairer so that our entire community has a chance to participate in the planning process. And so that we come back to these plans on a much more regular basis so that they don't sit and not keep up with the times. Now, there's concern, I hear concern in the question that the unique character of the plans will be lost. But that's just not going to happen. One of the lovely things about the neighborhood plans, regardless of the size of them, is that you do focus in on particular planning areas and talk about the unique characteristics of those areas and take that into account. So I think this is sort of the best of both worlds, that we actually will cover everyone and hear from everyone, And we also get to focus in on the things that people think are important about their neighborhoods and special about Madison. I think this is going to be a real improvement, and particularly in terms of equity and fairness, to make sure that everybody actually has a chance to contribute to their neighborhood plan.
The next question was submitted by someone in Hill Farms. In 2024, the American Rescue Plan Act funds and funds from the Incremental Finance District 25 will run out. How do you plan to replace those funds to pay for ongoing costs?
It's going to be a really short answer from me because I'm not privy to all of the city finances. So that will take some research from me. I don't really have a clear answer for it right now.
Well, one of the great things about the city of Madison is that we're really transparent. So our entire budget is online. From the initial instructions from the finance department through the agency requests, through the budget that the mayor proposes, through the amendments that the city council proposes, and then on to the adopted final budget. So it's all there if you're interested to go take a look. The question does imply a pretty serious issue for our community, but I want to go back to why this is a problem in the beginning. And that is that the state legislature has refused to increase either shared revenue or our ability to raise revenue in other ways over the last 10 years. So when former Governor Walker did what he did, he cranked down the levy limit so that we are extremely limited in how much we can raise the levy, and took away options for raising revenue at the city level. Essentially, we have the property tax. We don't have an income tax. We don't have a sales tax. We don't have other options. So for the ensuing decade, we have papered over structural deficits. I inherited a situation where we had a multi-million-dollar structural deficit coming in, and we have had to deal with that. What I have done that's different from previous administrations is that we are now planning forward our operating budget over 5 years, as opposed to trying to solve the problems on a one-year basis. And so we are able to look at sources of funding like ARPA, from TID closures, other sources of revenue, and make plans for when we will need them and when we might increase certain fees, when we want to take a pass on that fee, when we will have a TID district closing that we can take advantage of, so that we don't have big hits to the budget. I'm not going to lie to you, though, unless something changes at the legislature, we do have some very difficult budget years ahead, and we are going to have to look at what that means for services in the city. That's why it's important for us to be planning over the long term. And it's also important for us to be fighting at the legislature. Now, I don't want to jinx anything by saying anything out loud, but there are conversations happening right now about shared revenue at the state level. And hopefully that will come out in our favor and our budgets will ease a little bit so that we won't have to talk about cutting services. But it's really important that the state take the right actions to return some of the money that is generated right here in our community back so that we can invest it in our community.
Can you ask that question again?
I guess. In 2024, the American Rescue Plan Act funds and funds from Tax Incremental Finance District 25 will run out. And the questioner wants to know how we're going to make up for those funds and how we're going to pay for the things that those things are paying for now.
Yeah, no. I think we have to think about, like, how did we get here, right? And I think we can talk about, state decisions, state legislature, but what did we do as a city? And what did our mayor do in the past 4 years to get us to where we are today? As soon as I'm elected, I'm going to have to meet with Dave Schmidtke, our finance director. I'm sure he's pulling his hair out right now and really thinking about our future in 2024 and 2025. And I will request an audit of how the COVID money has been spent, and all the money and the cost of the BRT, bus rapid transit system. We're spending a lot of money on that right now. And we have to assess current systems in our city on look for opportunities for efficiency. Like you, I was not there, in making these decisions. But we have to look at the decisions that were made on how we invested the ARPA funds. I'm not saying, that who we invested in is wrong, but we have to make tough decisions as mayor. And we have to be fiscally responsible. We have a 4% increase in property taxes. And our seniors are being impacted by that. And so we have to really make these tough decisions. We should have made tough decisions the last 4 years so that we won't be here in 2024.
I have a call out for questions from our Zoom audience. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. If you have questions in our in-person audience and you don't have a card, you can raise your hand. We can get an index card to you. We do have some questions up here, but we do have a lot of duplication. So if you have a question that hasn't already been addressed in some way, please share it. For instance, this is getting into a little bit more in depth on the zoning question. A Midvale Heights resident wants to know, do you think that changing the definition of single family means allowing an unlimited number of adults in a house or an apartment? Would that mean an unlimited number of cars parking on the street? I think Dr. Rose.
No. I think there's some potential confusion in the question about the difference between occupancy limits and definition of family. Unfortunately, under our zoning code right now, we have a relatively strict definition of family and different rules for owner-occupied properties versus rental properties. But separate from that, buildings have occupancy limits, right? So we're not talking about an unlimited number of people living in a space that can't accommodate. We're talking about basic fairness between owner-occupied and rental properties. We're talking about updating how we think about what a family is, which I hope has changed over the past decades. And trying to make it easier for people to afford to live in our neighborhoods. I mean, we're getting emails in the mayor's office from folks who are saying, listen, I don't know what the rules are or what the right answer is, but I'm a young professional and I can't afford to rent in Madison. And so I have to have roommates. We've got 2 or 3 young professionals that want to live together, but that actually isn't allowed under the current zoning definitions. And so, people are trying to make it work. Madison's a really attractive community, and that's a good thing. But we do have to make it possible for folks who want to live here and in an affordable way.
Oh, you want So I guess I would go back to again. I mean, I think as mayor, I'm going to bring together our and reinvigorate our planning councils, our neighborhood planning councils, and talk about this, right? What is the vision of the city? So we are under a housing crisis and we need to build more housing. But we have to be mindful of the residents who have been paying taxes for years, who have lived here for years, and get their voices and what they want to see in the vision for Madison. We can't just make decisions like this and impact our families and cause chaos. Hear it from a planning commission that this is a resolution that's going to come up. Residents need to be involved in this change and voice their concerns. Before it even gets to the city's process. And these decisions have implications, as I mentioned, in our schools, in our neighborhoods. And so, particularly downtown in the campus area. And so I think we have an opportunity to explore what this looks like in other parts of the city. But we just can't make decisions like this. It is made, and it's a top-down decision. And we have to consider our homeowners, people who live in these neighborhoods. We can't think about call our residents NIMBYs, which we often hear, because they are taxpayers and they care about our city. And they're coming to the city council to voice their concerns. The rest of it.
Our society has changed dramatically, and what used to be considered the family unit has expanded now in many cases is multi-generational. So we've already increased the number of people that are legally under a zoning code can live in a home. It makes sense to adjust it, but it needs to be restricted at some point so that we don't have people using closets as bedrooms, although I've rented those apartments myself. And
Me too.
and the number of people that you have in a unit needs to be established by the building itself. Not whether or not it's a single family that can survive in it, but how many people can comfortably exist in that space. Let's use that standard to create what our limits are for the building instead of trying to come up with any kind of static number for every building. You know, the 700 square foot house isn't going to comfortably hold 6 people, but the 20,000 square foot mansion can hold 2 or 3 frats and they'll never even meet each other.
Yeah.
So it does need to be reviewed and looked at.
All right, the next question, after now we have a number of questions on transportation. I'm gonna is there adequate funding for the bus rapid transit system without burdening taxpayers? Mayor Rhodes Conway has been a big proponent for bus rapid transit. How would the other candidates improve upon that, or what would your transportation goals be? And a Nakoma resident who was upset that some bus lines have closed in the last few years, and what should we do to improve Madison's public transit? So I'm going to put all 3 of those questions together, and I'm going to start with who's next?
Gloria.
Okay.
Gloria is next. Okay,
All
thank
right.
you for being the moderator.
So I'm in support generally around the bus rapid transit system. I think that many mayors have tried to make the bus rapid transit system happen. But you have our community has changed, our environment has changed. Due to COVID, ridership is low. Our ridership is lower than it was pre-COVID. And so we should have assessed, as mayor, if I was mayor, I would have assessed where we are on ridership, taken some time to do an analysis, an equity analysis that I have been asking for the past several years. Because what is happening is that we're building a transit system first, and then we want to build housing in this area, in different parts of the city for more density. Which I think it should be backwards, right? We should build more housing, and depending on the needs of the city, we build transportation. And so what we have here is because we didn't do an equity analysis from the beginning of a process, which I know that you should do an equity analysis to ensure that you don't have any unintended consequences that will impact our most vulnerable communities. And that's exactly what's happening right now. We have residents who live on the far north side, south side, west side, who have to walk 2-3 blocks further to get on a bus. And it's an injustice for our communities of color, our disability community, and our senior community. It's not right. It is not right. And so, yes, in a perfect world, would we love a bus transit system in the high density areas? Of course. Every growing city wants that. But you do not do that at the expense of our city of Madison residents, particularly our most vulnerable. And because of our budget deficit coming up in the next few years, we're going to be in big trouble. And we're going to have to make some tough choices. And, yeah, that's what I would say. Thank you.
The bus system in Madison is a service more than anything else. We subsidize it. Anything that we do to improve it or to change it should increase ridership, increase users, and decrease the subsidy at all, as much as possible. The BRT system, I don't believe is going to do that. It's undoing things that we put in place for Vision Zero type implementation, where we have infrastructure to protect pedestrians that now we have to remove so that the bus can run through those areas. We're going to be stripping parking off where the bus runs through, which means if you have a business in the middle of the block, you no longer have a way to get deliveries or to have your customers stop and come in. They have to park on the other side of the block and walk into you. I don't think it was thought out well. I think it's a goal for the 100,000 people that are predicted to come into Madison over the next decade. We need to make sure that we are serving all communities that use the bus now and not focus on the shiny new fast system, which I'm curious how it's going to be really rapid. But now that I've realized that the bus routes are about a half mile apart, if they make the bus stops about a half mile apart, it'll go a lot faster because you're not going to stop as often. It's also not going to increase usership. When I look at the old bus routes where the stops were set every 350 feet about in dense neighborhoods, part of the reason the bus system was slow is it had to stop to pick up more riders everywhere. I've heard from bus drivers that are very upset because their voices have not been heard on this. And instead of listening to rank and file to see what they could do to improve, we jumped to a system that nobody even looked at other than it's a shiny new thing. And all of the managers that have been brought into place are from the outside. We didn't promote from within Metro, where we have people that really understand the ridership and the way the city works. Instead, we've brought in new bodies that just want to focus on the BRT. I would not support it because I don't think it's going to be successful for the next 10 years.
Do I want to make sure that I get all the pieces of the question in? So there's a question about the cost or how it's paid for. There's a question about access to neighborhoods.
One resident was concerned that bus lines or routes
Right,
had
so
been shut down.
the
And was
redesign.
concerned about that, and yes, can we afford it?
And was there a third piece?
Not really.
Okay. So let me talk just first about how this is all put together. There's two costs to the system. There's a capital cost of the construction, and then there's the operating cost in the long term. The good news is the capital cost is almost entirely borne by the federal government. And thanks to the Biden administration, we are actually able to make the buses for the bus rapid transit system 100% electric, which is something that I'm very excited about. It means that our air quality is going to be better along bus routes, and it means that our contributions to climate change are less. In terms of how the operating is paid for, one of the features of designing the system is that we looked at where there was high ridership already and where we were running a lot of bus lines already, and where the bus rapid transit system would allow us to substitute that service for existing bus lines. So it's not actually increasing operating costs that much at all, because we're basically, that was the instruction, was keep within the operating cost, but build a better system. And so that's what we did. Now, when we went through the network redesign, which is separate from the bus rapid transit system, the city council did make the decision to invest more funds into the network. So that cost is going up because the council voted to increase service in a number of places, which I think is, that's warranted. That's what we heard from the community that they wanted. Going forward, we're going to continue have to balance the requests for transit, which are pretty robust with the cost of providing that transit. And that's a future conversation for our budgets and for the council to wrestle with. And I want to visit the question of how we looked at redesigning the transit network, though, because I think there's some misunderstanding here. The initial question in looking at how our transit system was designed and what we could do better was, how is it impacting people of color and low-income people? And what we found was that people of color and low-income people are actually had much longer commutes on our bus system and were forced to transfer between routes much more frequently than white people. So we already have an inequitable system. And the redesign was specifically looked at to improve the situation for low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods that are predominantly of color. The bus rapid transit system was designed to connect employment centers across our community, which are shifting from downtown to be across our community. So this is baked in. Equity is baked into the design of the system that we will have starting this summer.
Great. The next question comes from, I believe, Zoom. Someone who lives in the Spring Harbor neighborhood would like to know your plans to use Madison as an example city to address climate change. What should Madison be doing to address climate change, and are we an example city? The first person would be Scott.
I think we're already doing a lot of things. We've gone to renewable energy in a lot of facets. We're actually even starting getting some solar installers trained to put in more solar systems for us. Madison is home to the most studied lake in the country. Lake Mendota is constantly studied, and if we can't help the rest of the country learn how to take care of our lakes and our environment in general, we're in a sad situation, because we do have the university and that lake being studied. We have a lot of things that we can do to improve that. We've got the first real world test for pervious pavement or infiltration on pavement out at the Sycamore Park, where to qualify for the test, it had to infiltrate 100 inches of rain in an hour. I hope we never get into a situation where we have 100 inches of rain in an hour. But the scientists that set it up determined that when it gets to the point where it'll only infiltrate 10 inches of rain in an hour, it has failed. Using that type of pavement wherever we can and helping create drainage ways, even if we just do it on bike paths, is going to improve our lake quality and our environment in general. Other things we can do is explore different types of pavement. There are parts of the country that are, or parts of the world, I guess, I don't think it's anywhere in the US yet, where they're using recycled plastics to make asphalt. They've discovered that patching it works better than standard asphalt. It holds up well even in Scandinavian countries. So it will work here, and it will solve one of the other environmental problems that we have, is the recycling that we all do a great job on, but nobody wants to buy it from us anymore. There's no market for it.
Recycling market is actually going gangbusters right now, but that will change, I'm sure. And so there's two aspects to being a leader on climate change. And one is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as much and as fast as we can. And the other is to improve our resilience as a community to the impacts of climate change. I think that, so Madison made a commitment some years ago that by 2030, our city facilities and our fleet would be 100% renewable fuels or energy. We are well on our way to that. And so we're at about 74% of our electric use in the city is renewable. And we are using every single roof that we own to install solar panels. And under my administration, we did double the green power crew that is learning how to install solar by installing them on our own roofs, so that we are building up the solar industry. And we're also rapidly converting our fleet. We have a number of electric vehicles, but perhaps more importantly, we're converting our heavy vehicles to biodiesel. which is locally grown and produced in Wisconsin or nearby. Because there's not going to be electric snowplows anytime soon. So we gotta make sure that we're converting our whole fleet. On the resilience side, and so let me just say, climate is one of my core issues, and I'm proud to be the current chair of Climate Mayors, which is a national organization of almost 500 mayors that are working on climate change. We need to do everything we can within city government to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, but we also have to facilitate our community doing the same. The two biggest sources of emissions are transportation and buildings. So we're working on transportation, and we need to work on buildings as well. And so I was proud to be a sponsor of the building energy policy that we put forward with a number of other alders, some of whom are in the room. And I'm hopeful that we will get that passed so that at least commercial buildings in our community will know what their energy use is so that they can learn how to reduce it. But we also have to build resilience. And one of the things that started when I came in was a look at every single watershed across our community, to map the watersheds, to understand where they were flooding, and to do the work that we need to do to be prepared for future flooding. We're also looking at heat islands across our community. We're looking at pretty dramatically increasing tree planting in neighborhoods where there aren't trees. And we're looking at how we can help communities survive the impacts of climate change, whether that's heat or storms, and in part through hiring an emergency manager whose job it will be to help make these plans. So there's a lot more work to do, but I am very excited about doing it.
Yeah, I agree that there's a lot more work to do. I want to center environmental justice and sustainability in every infrastructure and development initiative. With the Building Energy Savings Program that was recently introduced, it, again, I think what it does is it is not getting the voice of the people who are going to be impacted by this. I think it's going to have some good outcomes, but I think we have to really bring people along to understand the reason why this is important for our city. Not everybody understands that. There are other areas that we need to think about, like, and I'm not an expert in environmental, right? I've met with some experts. We need to rely on experts who are here in the city, who I met with, who work for the university, who are environmental experts. But we have to look at poor stormwater runoff. And we have a PFAS issue in well 15, it's a significant issue. And we have to figure out ways to clean that and respond to that. We have a lack of environmental impact studies that are to pursue environmental initiatives that prioritize preserving our lakes, right? Lakes are important. I want to work with Clean Lakes Alliance to make sure that we have clean lakes. We have to do environmental studies on our own buildings, our own city buildings. I think the mayor, that's what she's talked about. But we have to protect Madison's tree canopies as well. And we're not doing a good job on that. We're losing our trees. And we need to develop, I think we are relying on a plan and from 2014 maybe about our tree canopies, and we need to do a better job. And so we have a lot of work to do. There are some things happening. I think we have to really bring in our experts who are here in this community to devise a plan and a vision for a future on environment and sustainability. And that's not currently happening. And so that's what I would recommend.
Another question from Zoom. I don't know the neighborhood. Many local businesses are still struggling following the pandemic. What will you do for the next 4 years to support these businesses? Such a Rose Conway is first.
Yeah, thank you. The pandemic really did have a tremendous impact on our small business community. It was, I think, very hard for many of us to see. One of the things that we did when we did receive the ARPA funds was immediately deploy them into grants for small businesses to just help them get through. And I think that was pretty successful. I think businesses really appreciated it. We did a number of other things, listening to the businesses as they were struggling. Should we open? Should we not open? How do we navigate all of this? Working with public health. And one of the things that was asked for and that we figured out a way to do in pretty short order was the streeteries, which I think have been enormously popular across the community. And, you know, we thought that was just going to be a pandemic thing, but people liked them so much that we turned right around and figured out how to make that a permanent program. So those will be part of our community for hopefully decades to come. But we've also focused on how do we support entrepreneurs? We have a system that Kiva's Madison's a Kiva city. I don't know if you guys know the Kiva platform where you can do microloans to entrepreneurs. It's something that we then match the loans from the city. It's been, I think, really successful. I always say this every time I mention Kiva. I have promised to loan to any Madison-based Kiva loan, so take me up on it, folks. But I think that's been really exciting. But for maybe the thing that is most exciting about the work we've done on supporting small businesses is the commercial ownership program, which is a program where businesses that are owned by underrepresented folks, so women, people of color, veterans, LGBTQ folks, can apply for a long-term, no-interest loan from the city to purchase their location. And so it might be their storefront or their office or a larger building to put them on a path to building generational wealth. And we have done this with some just fantastic businesses in our community. And it's really exciting to see them controlling their own destiny in a different way. And it's sort of parallel to the work that we're doing on home ownership, but I think it's really important to include small businesses in that as well. So I'd see those efforts continuing. We're also starting to build these types of programs into TIF districts as they roll out. So for example, the new South Madison TID has a whole pot of money set aside to do these commercial ownership assistance loans, to do grants to small businesses, to support training for entrepreneurs in the South Madison area, which is something that I'm really excited about.
So jobs are not paying a living wage right now. And typical Madisonian can't afford the housing that's being built right now. Over 50% of the housing right now being built is not affordable for Black people. And our businesses have a staffing shortage, right? And look at State Street, our central part of our city. If you've been down there recently, we need to revitalize State Street. Childcare is a significant issue right now, and that's why people can't go back to work. My strategy is to develop a mayor's economic development advisory team that will consist of all the chambers, the Latino chamber, Black chamber, the Madison chamber, Dane by local, owners, business owners, commercial developers, starting block, and city staff to develop my mayoral priorities. We haven't done a post-COVID recovery plan. And our world has changed. And so we have to really respond to the staffing shortages and the future budget deficit, and that includes our child care. We need to expand child care and early childhood education. We need to work on the school to workforce pipeline within our schools. That is something as a mayor I will bring, is work with our school district to prepare our young people to the workforce, particularly the trades. Talent development, right? We have to retain talent in our high schools. And we have to develop build a sense of community that is inclusive, building urban spaces that is livable, and housing affordability. And we need to partner with Starting Block to really bring innovation into our city, which attract coastal capital to Madison. the Madison Public Market is going to do incredible for us as a city. Building and bringing small business owners and providing mentorship for small business owners for them to expand. Again, State Street is critical for our city, and we need to work to revitalize that. We need to increase wages. We need to prepare the workforce, our young people into the workforce. And that is how we're going to get out of the economic issue that we're dealing with.
I'm a little uneasy using government funding to support businesses after the pandemic. During the pandemic, it made sense. It was federal funding. Any funding we do has to be equitable between the new businesses trying to start up and the existing businesses that are struggling. I've been a Madison resident forever. The businesses I remember driving past on State Street, yeah, you used to be able to drive on State Street, are long gone. The restaurants in Madison changed so quickly that if you buy one of those coupon tins, you better get going quickly because they may not be here by the end of the time those coupons are still good. That's been a cycle forever in Madison. Businesses love coming here because we're a very attractive city. I'm not sure how much we should try to prop up ones that aren't making it. The cycle of new and exciting businesses opening up and then either leaving or ending has been going on forever. We can't support them with public funds if they can't make it on their own. Increasing pay would be great. We got to get that started at a higher level than just the city of Madison, because if we try to do a city of Madison minimum wage, we're going to lose a lot of businesses.
We're already preempted.
Yeah, we're going to go outside the city for anything we try to do to up that. Again, it's a cycle of business. Yes, we can help out, especially startups, but we need to make sure that anything we do, any funding we put out there is equitable across the board to everybody.
Well, I'm surprised that we have not received, at least the cards I've received, not one public safety question. So I'm gonna make one up. Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of concern, growing concern over incidents, car thefts, and shots fired, and break-ins, and a variety of other crime. Is crime out of control in Madison? And what would you, as mayor, propose to do about crime in the city? I think we go to Scott first. Why don't we?
Okay, you can start with me. We need to keep all of our officers on the street and increase the Madison Police Department staffing levels as much as we can. It's going to be a budget hit, but we can start by just stopping using uniformed officers, patrol officers, to do transports up to Winnebago. That could be done by a mental health professional and a driver. We can take the person who's in a mental health crisis, put them in a comfortable vehicle with someone who's trained to respond to them if their situation worsens during the transport, instead of putting them in the back seat of a squad car with two officers to make that trip. It's not a great spot to be in for anybody. And if you weren't in a mental health crisis at that point, I'm thinking about an hour into that ride, you're not going to be in better shape anyway. The other thing we need to do is look at where we can schedule our resources or target our enforcement. Every day we go on priority only calls for at least a couple hours. We need to have more officers available. It may mean that daytime shifts don't have as many cops as we need on a swing shift or on a late shift. It may mean that we need to put more officers in certain neighborhoods, certain days of the week. The other thing that I really, really want to do that's going to cost a lot of money is put body cams on all the officers. The incident in Memphis shows just how important that is, but it also showed that body cams are not the only answer. We also need the overhead traffic cameras to help capture the scene. The footage from the body cameras in Memphis could have been inconclusive. without that overhead shot showing everything that happened. Madison needs to start planning for that type of surveillance with our police, especially if we're going to try to push more officers out on the street. And we need it. We need more cops out there. The other advantage of the traffic cameras, if we can get them up and running, you don't have to chase the guy if you can watch him on video as he's going through the city. You can track him pretty well. Get ahead of him if you've got one officer watching the cameras. I'm hoping that we never have a Memphis type incident in Madison. But if we do, I want to make sure that we have the cameras to prove exactly what happened.
So that's a big question. Let me start by saying I think there's really three approaches to dealing with crime and violence in our community. And there's the immediate approach, there's the sort of midterm interventions, and then there's the long-term investments that need to be made. But overall, is crime out of control? No. Our community continues to be a fundamentally safe community. And we need to keep that in mind. Now, that said, there is no incidence of gun violence that's acceptable in our community. None. And so what the police department has been doing is applying evidence-based interventions and using data to target our resources to specifically reduce incidents of gun violence, to reduce car thefts, and to reduce traffic crashes. And following that data over the past year, we can tell that it's working. Shots fired are down about 20% right now from last year and over the 5-year average. And they're able to do this work in part because I included in my last budget a position to do that strategic planning and data analysis. It was the #1 request from Chief Barnes, and we weren't able to fund all of his requests, but we did fund that one because he knows and I know how important it is to effectively use our resources. We also did fund additional officers with the town of Madison coming into the city. I thought it was important for us to make sure that we had the bodies to deal with that new area and population. We are running a pilot to look at the mental health transports to have those not be done by squad cars. And we're looking at other ways that we can shift responsibilities off of the folks that are out on the street in the squad cars and to other parts of the city. So that's why we developed the CARES program, which sends a crisis worker and a paramedic to nonviolent 911 calls that involve behavioral or mental health. That's been enormously successful. We have 2 more expansions of that program planned this year, and I think there's room for expansion beyond that as well. We need to let our police officers do the things that they are best at doing, and that involves working on violent crime. But we also have to make sure that we're investing in the things that reduce crime in the long term. And that's taking a public health approach to gun violence. It's investing in violence prevention through our violence prevention unit and implementing the violence roadmap to violence reduction that public health has put together. And it's continuing to invest in things like affordable housing and youth programming and education in the long term through community development.
So I think that public safety is essential. I mentioned it earlier, right? It really impacts the quality of life for people. And so when you have a burglary happening, you know, your own house or your neighbor, or a robbery, or sexual assault, a homicide, shots fired. We just had a few of them this summer. It impacts the quality of life of our community. And I want to keep Madison safe. And so when you see trends, it's critical that we take that seriously. We shouldn't say that we're trending in the right direction when we just had, when I left the mayor's office, we had 4 homicides a year, and now we're trending 10 homicides a year. That concerns me. That should concern everybody in this room and all residents in this city. What is happening is that we are not collaborating. And so as mayor, I wanted to designate a position that establishes an Office of Violence Reduction that will take the public health approach. Actually, one of the things I did when I left the mayor's office was give the mayor a memo on where we go next around violence. And that was a model of CAHOOTS, very similar to the CARES model. I worked as deputy mayor with public health to establish the violence prevention. I'm still on the violence prevention team. But what's happening is that we're not working together. And so when these systems don't work together, we lose. And so we see these trends. I want to establish a homicide review commission because when the homicides that we're seeing identify these trends and they identify issues of domestic violence or drugs or whatever, right? And we need to know that so that we can respond accordingly. As I said earlier, we're losing young Black kids to violence. And it's an equity issue. So we need to wrap ourselves around young people, working with our schools, our most vulnerable youth in this city, to wrap ourselves around them so that we don't lose them. It's the work that I did as CEO of Briar Patch Youth Services. We need a holistic approach. And it's a huge issue. And so if we do not get on it, if we do not have experts who are working together, like the law enforcement leaders of color collaboration that I'm part of, Judge Mitchell put together a group of experts who are meeting on a regular basis to talk about juvenile crime in this city and Dane County. We have to put all that together and share information and figure out a pathway forward. Thank you.
I have a question, a couple of, somebody in Westmoreland, somebody in Dunsmarsh.
Did you answer that? You should. Okay, sorry. Just didn't want to leave you out.
No, I went on a board meeting. Madison City Council is much larger than cities of similar size. Do you have any thoughts on reducing the number of seats? And do we have too many committees? And should we raise the pay of alders? So let's try to put all that together. And even though I was off on my rotation, let's have the mayor start that.
Okay. Sorry, so council size, committee numbers, and alder pay? Okay. Well, just, bring up the most controversial things. So listen, I think, let me take the two things. So on committees, I do think we have too many committees. And I think that not because I don't value the residents that spend time on these committees and offer their thoughts, but because I hear all too often from my appointees that they're not having a positive experience on our committees because they don't get the training that they need. They don't get the support that they need. They don't understand what their mission of the committee is supposed to be. And we have 100 committees. We have 1,000 appointees. And it's really irregular. Like there's 5 housing committees and 2 transportation committees. And does this make sense? It doesn't make sense. So I do think we need to look at that. I think we need to look at streamlining the committees so that the folks that serve on them can get better trained and supported and give us better feedback. And that's what I'd like to do. We've been trying to do it over the course of 4 years. There was a little thing called the pandemic. We haven't gotten there yet, but I do think it's important to work on. In terms of the council, I think that as Madison grows, it has gotten harder and harder to be an alder. You're responsible for a larger geography and more people, and it is a challenging job. I'm not going to sit here and say that I know what the right answer is to make it better. I think that the council has taken some good steps in increasing the size of their office and the number of their staff so that they get better support from those staff. It's one of the things that I advocated for when I left the council. So that's good, and I think we need to see if that improves things. The council has not been able to agree on whether there should be fewer of them, whether they should be paid more, whether they should be full-time, whether they should stagger their terms or not, although some of you, I think you'll probably get to vote on some of that in the future. But I do think that we need to figure out how we can make it more feasible for alders to effectively serve their districts. And that's going to be an ongoing conversation, which the community needs to have, and I think the council needs to have with itself.
So I agree. I think we have too many committees. It's what I thought about when I was in the mayor's office, quite a bit. I think that, we need to provide a vision for our committees. I think that there are some committees that we should, that are not, effective anymore. Maybe effective at one point, they're not meeting on a regular basis. They're having some issues, but we need to provide some leadership to these committees so that they can see the bigger vision of the city and how their work is connected to the vision of the city, right? Because these are residents who really want to be there, but it's become to the point where it's just like they pass a resolution, they talk about it, and then they make a decision and then they move on, right? But as mayor, I want to engage these committees, and talk to our residents and get their perspective about, what they see, how effective their committee is, how they see, their future and their voice in the process is important for me. And I want them to see the bigger vision, and set that vision, right? And we do that together. That's a lot of committees, it's a lot of people, but it can be done. And we need to do that. Council size, I believe that, as we are growing, I think it's important to consider that, but I also want to make sure that, they don't become full-time, elected officials. I think that, we need to keep the council size. I believe that it's manageable that way. They have smaller districts that they can engage their residents, with. It's hard as it is, to be a, part-time council person and to increase the size of residents that they will have to serve if we, decrease the size of the council, will be an issue. I think if we keep it the way it is, as we grow, we're going to continue to probably add, council, but, and I also think alder pay, I think that they should, stay where they're at. I don't agree, particularly where we're at now, that we should give them, a raise. I think that this is, a position, just as when I was served as the Madison School Board, was public service. And that's important. And so we need to have people with lived experience who can serve on these councils, have a full-time job. And so I think what would happen is if we, did full-time and increase their pay, it would just, take away. I'm sorry, I got the red thing, so sorry.
All right. Council size, council pay, and staggered elections. That's up to their bosses, which is all of you. You get to vote on that and decide. If you want full-time alder people and you want to pay for those full-time alder people, vote it in. But it's going to have to be the entire city that decides that's what they want. As far as committees, subcommittees, and the subcommittees, yeah, we have way too many. The joke was always we'd have to have a subcommittee to determine when the next meeting was going to be for the first committee, but they'd have to confer with the other subcommittee to make sure the schedules were okay. We get in our own way a lot. The Monona Terrace should be a great example. It took 50 years to get us to agree on how to do that. And then the committees to how to run it and share that with the county were absolutely astounding. We don't need redundant committees working and looking at the same thing. We should simplify it so that the public knows what committee they need to get in touch with for the issues they want to address. It's government for the sake of being in government. We don't need to continue adding more committees. We can simplify it dramatically.
Okay, it's time for closing remarks from our candidates, and we're going to go in the same order as the opening statements, starting with Gloria.
Okay.
2 minutes for your closing remarks.
So as a lifelong Madisonian, I've experienced Madison in its past, engaged Madison at its present, and will lead Madison into its future. The murder of Tyree Nichols by Memphis police was horrific. It was all caught on body cameras. I will work to ensure that every Madison police officer who is working on patrol is equipped with body cameras to ensure that we have transparency and accountability. The current mayor has lacked the leadership to speak up on the issue for 4 years. We need a mayor that will lead with transparency. This mayor has misled our residents on crime by saying we're heading in the right direction, while we continue to experience crime in our city. As mayor, I will not jeopardize our city services to pay for a bus rapid transit system that is not equitable. We are building a transit system based on a business model for residents who can afford to live in so-called affordable housing units in high-density areas to increase ridership. But if you live on the far north, south, and west side of Madison, you have to walk 2-3 blocks further. This is an injustice to our communities of color, disability and senior communities, and those who depend on transit. As mayor, I will not divide our community and will stand up for the voices of all residents. Our residents speaking at council meetings are not NIMBYs. They are resident taxpayers who care about our city. And let's not forget what happened during the social unrest of George Floyd's murder. At a time where we needed a leader to bring our community together, the mayor divided our community. We need an experienced leader who understands our values and how we can move Madison forward together. Thank you.
My experience in Madison is that we are filled with people who really care about the city and care about each other. And I have faith that if the citizens are given the chance to voice their opinion and put their money into all the programs that we need, they'll make the best decisions. I hope I can make that happen. Now, we have to get all the information out to people about every situation, even the most mundane things. So one of the biggest problems with the bus system that's being changed, something most people would never consider, but if you realize that we've got 4 bus transfer stations right now, bus drivers love those because they provide bathrooms. When we get away from that, bus drivers have no access to restrooms during their shift. They would have to stop and run into a business to try and use a public restroom. Changing away from just that simple problem without giving a chance for everybody involved to understand that's one of the changes shouldn't happen. You know, it's such a simple thing that nobody thought about, nobody looked at. I think if I get elected and I can get all of the information out to the public, the pros and cons and what every decision will affect, the citizens of Madison will make the right decision most of the time. When we fail together.
Let me start by saying thank you to all of you for taking time out of your night to be here and listen to us. And thanks again to the folks online for zooming in. It's really heartening to see so many people interested. I hope that whoever of us you vote for in the primary, you will also vote in the state Supreme Court election, which I consider to be the most important election on the ballot this spring. Over the past 4 years, I've led Madison through some of its most challenging times. And despite the pandemic and despite the challenges that we have faced, we have made progress. We've built housing. We've designed a better transit system. We're working on climate change. We're working on public safety. All of the things that we've talked about tonight, we're making progress on. My vision is a Madison that is sustainable, that is affordable, that is beautiful, and is welcoming to everyone. We have some work to do to make that true. But I believe that together we can build a better Madison. And so I ask for your vote on February 21st and on April 4th. And I invite you to learn more about me and my campaign at satyaformadison.com. I'm also happy to talk to any of you tonight if you feel like your question wasn't answered, or if you have any questions about any of the things that any of us said up here tonight. Just come and find me. I'm happy to answer the questions, or you can reach me at info@satyaformadison.com. Thank you again to all of you here and all of you online, and thanks to all the neighborhood associations that put their time and effort into making this night possible. Thank you.
This concludes the candidate forum. Yeah. We made a plan to doors in the February 21st primary, and again in the April 4th spring election. 3 candidates here on the primary ballot. The top 2 vote getters move on to the April 4th spring election. There's lots of information on the tables as you leave from the candidates. There's also some information from the League of Women Voters. So check that out. Thanks to the candidates for joining us. Thanks to the sponsoring neighborhood associations for organizing the forum. Thanks to the Sequoia Library for hosting us, and to Alderville Tischler for recording us. And thank you for attending. Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you. Good night.
News 3 Now is always on.
Get the Channel 3000 app, activate the push alerts, and we will send you breaking news, traffic, and weather alerts as it happens.
The Channel 3000 app. Get it now.
Powered by News 3 Now.